What is up, guys? This is Josh from KC3 Takes, as we are joined by another guest, and that is Jameis 101 on Twitter. We really appreciate you coming on. All right, so let's just get right into it. Why? What do you like about Jameis Winston?
Um, he's in my mind, he's the most fascinating character study in the entire NFL. A lot of people have asked me, why did you write the book about him? Why didn't you pick another quarterback? And I've said if there was another quarterback that I would have written a similar book about, it probably would have been Matt Stafford. Um, but Stafford simply, he's not an interesting character. Um, I do believe that I'm sure I could make a case that he's on a Hall of Fame course as well if I really dug into the stats. But he's just not an interesting person to follow, and I don't mean that as an insult to him. But Jameis, in my mind, is the most slighted and slandered quarterback in the history of the NFL, and there isn't a close second. And that in and of itself makes him just a fascinating character to study. So when I did the research and he actually studying him sort of the book wrote itself. It made it easy.
All right, so I'm assuming you were a Buccaneer fan before you really got into Jameis Winston.
No, not at all. The Bucks are the Bucks are totally irrelevant to me. I mean I saw their Super Bowl for 55 years ago, whatever it was, but no, they're as a franchise they're irrelevant to me.
So do you feel like the Buccaneers have done Winston dirty or pieces around him, or what do you? I mean, because the fact.
Jackson, your internet's kind of cutting in and out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm only hearing little bits.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. Well, I'll try and get out what I can if you guys can hear me. I was just gonna say, what do you think is the problem in Tampa? Why they aren't winning?
I would say it's the same problem that you're seeing in Cleveland. It's the same problem that really has been in Detroit for forever in the Super Bowl era. There are great organizations in the NFL, and there's everybody else. And Tampa is one of those everybody else organizations. Now it can get turned around, but it isn't a coincidence when you look throughout the history of the NFL and you see the same teams, generally speaking, always at the top. Organizations are what win in the NFL. Quarterbacks don't win. Organizations win.
All right. Correct. Since you're not a Bucks fan, like Buccaneers really weren't in the picture before Jameis Winston at all. Do you feel like there is a better team that Jameis could fit on?
Well, sure. I mean, I don't want to denigrate the Bucks in any way, but Dak Prescott is in a situation that basically every quarterback in the NFL outside of Tom Brady would envy. He has a dominant line, he has a dominant run game. Peter King gave an interview earlier this year and said, "I don't know how to even evaluate a quarterback who only throws to wide open receivers."
Yeah.
So every quarterback in the NFL is envious of Dak's situation. But I don't think that Jameis himself, I don't think he wants out of Tampa. I think he loves his teammates and his coaches. And I just sort of hope and pray the best for the young fella.
Yeah, they did change some things in Tampa, obviously hiring Bruce Arians, and whether Jameis makes them look better or they're just having good seasons. I mean, he has guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, had Adam Humphries. Do you feel like it's just been a defensive struggle? Because they have been. Do you feel like there's been some growing pains for Jameis, and it's kind of been.
Jackson, can you repeat the last part?
What part didn't you get?
Just the very end.
I was just going to say, what do you think? I know I kind of already asked it, but I feel like the Tampa offense is really, really good. Like Evans, Godwin. Do you think it's primarily the defense? Do you think it's been past coaching? What do you think the big problem is in Tampa?
Oh, yeah, the pass defense is historically bad. Todd Bowles and Arians came in. They fixed the run defense. The run defense is fine. But the pass defense has been historically bad. This is now, the third year in a row. And 4 out of 5 years, their defense has been terrible that Jameis has been there. And 4 out of 5 years, their run game has been really bad since Jameis has been there. So the offense is fine. I mean, you put Tampa's offense with even just a league average defense, and they're a playoff team, no problem. And I've said that really since Jameis came into the league. If you give him just a league average defense and a league average run game, nothing special, just league average, they'll get you in the playoffs.
All right, so I just want to ask about some of the most recent games he has had this year. And yes, he's had the 5 interceptions against the Panthers. And yes, everyone has a bad game. But then if you look at it against Tennessee, he has 2 interceptions. And other than that, he hasn't had as much interceptions in the past 5 games. But this year, total, he has 12 interceptions, 16 touchdowns, 247 passing yards with a QBR rating of 53.1. Why do you think Jameis Winston, he can get the yardage, as we can see, but sometimes it feels like he's not passing like to the right people, or he's not doing the right thing, if that makes somewhat sense?
Sure, sure. Um, Arians has said, and even past coaches have said that, if Jameis has one weakness, or if he has a greatest weakness, it's a Superman complex. He doesn't like to give up on any play. And he reminds me a great deal of Favre when I watch him play, because Favre was the same way. He just didn't want to give up on any play. He thought no matter how busted the play was, he could make it work. Um, and that's a hard thing to coach out of somebody, because it isn't just, a mechanical issue. It's mental. It's actually spiritual if you want to really get into it. It's something that they just believe they can make everything work. And Jameis is like that. I mean, when you look at the London game, you know, people just stare at a box score and they say 5 interceptions. Okay, well, 2 of those came at the very end of the game, where for most quarterbacks, and I won't name names, but for most quarterbacks, they're going to purposely throw the ball out of bounds on those situations rather than risk an interception. Most quarterbacks are very, very aware of their passer rating and of how they're perceived by the media. There's a reason that Aaron Rodgers throws the ball out of bounds more than any other quarterback in the history of. And there's a reason that the report came out saying that Aaron Rodgers refused to throw into the 10 to 20 yard of the field, middle of the field when McCarthy, because that's a high interception area. And so a lot of quarterbacks in situations where your team's down big, you're getting blown out, or even just, at the end of the half where you're going to throw a Hail Mary, watch for the quarterback that throw the ball out of bounds on purpose. Every NFL quarterback can easily keep the ball in the field of play, but many of them will just chuck it out of bounds because they don't want to risk an interception. Jameis Winston doesn't care. He's never cared about stats. I mean, going back to when he was playing Pop Warner, he just doesn't care. He's going to do whatever he thinks gives the team at least a chance to get back in the game. And if it's a pick and the media crushes him for it, it doesn't bother him. So that's part of it. You mentioned the 2 interceptions in Tennessee. Bruce Arians in his post-game press conference, before the media even got to ask him, he said, you guys are going to mention the 2 interceptions. And then he said, quote, Jameis Winston didn't throw one DAMN interception. And he said that both of those interceptions were 100% on the wide receivers because they ran the wrong routes. Now, this isn't something Jameis will mention because he never throws anybody under the bus. After the snap hit him in the face when he wasn't looking for it, and he was, calling out signals to his wide receivers at the end, and he gave the post-game press conference, he said, "Oh, it was a perfect snap. It hit me right in the face." And he wasn't joking. He was actually crediting the center. Well, no, I mean, most people from the outside looking in would say, there was an error there, and it certainly wasn't on the quarterback. But Jameis is out there just doing whatever he can to try to keep his team in the game. And if it hurts his stats, it hurts his stats. And a lot of quarterbacks aren't like that. And you can watch on all sorts of plays, even, a 3rd and 13 where they'll dump off instead of, take a risky throw. But Jameis is always near the top in the NFL and the advanced metrics and things like aggressive percentage. I think you fellas are in Kansas City, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got you have a great young quarterback in Mahomes. But the only quarterback in the entire NFL that has started all games that has been less aggressive than Mahomes is Kirk Cousins. That's it. And that's not a rip on Mahomes. It's just that he doesn't have to be aggressive. He can throw to wide open guys. Andy Reid is a magnificent play caller. And out of every quarterback in the whole NFL, the only one less aggressive than Mahomes is Kirk Cousins. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think I've at least said this a lot. A lot of quarterbacks are make or break by the system that they're in. you take a look, Mahomes is a great quarterback, but he has a lot of wide open wide receivers, and the play calling is awesome. And I think that was a problem in Tampa Bay. So I don't want to write off Jameis Winston. But right now, just as a quarterback, not teams, not supporting the quarterback, where would you rank Jameis Winston among the rest of the NFL?
Well, I love the question because generally speaking, when people ask where you'd rank a quarterback, they're not talking about ranking quarterbacks. They're actually talking about ranking quarterbacks plus coaches
Yeah,
plus
exactly. Which I hate.
Yeah, if you're talking about just quarterbacks outside of coaching and roster, you're really talking about talent level.
Exactly.
And I do believe that Jameis at worst is a top 8 talent in the NFL. At best, I'd say he's in the. I would put him in there with guys Carson Wentz, Patrick Mahomes, um, Jameis, Matthew Stafford, guys like say Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and a healthy Cam Newton. Those would be the 8 talented quarterbacks, and I would put Jameis ahead of Cam and ahead of Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen simply because I don't believe in those 3 players as pure. They have some freakish athletic ability, but as pure passers, I think Jameis was better as a 19-year-old than they've ever been.
Kind of talking about that in the top QBs, unlike teams and who they are coached by. Do you feel like Jameis Winston, if he could put in all the effort and would like just put in more effort, do you think he could make his way into the top 3 where you have what I would say is Patrick Mahomes, Carson Wentz, like around those kind of talent guys? Yes, I agree he is probably in the top 8 with talent level.
I'm not really sure what you mean by your question. If you could rephrase it a little bit.
Sorry, do you think Jameis Winston could eventually become a top 3 quarterback?
Oh, sure. I mean, really with situation. You look at Tom Brady. He's the Godspeed. I said this on the Barstool thing. They kind of lost their mind. It's actually a compliment. Um, people get mad at me when I don't say that Brady's the GOAT, but he's not the GOAT. He doesn't come remotely close to Otto Graham as far as the greatest of all time. But he is the Godspeed, the greatest of the Super Bowl era, and that's a extreme compliment that I'm giving him. And when you look at that, I mean, you're talking about every single quarterback of the Super Bowl era, and Tom Brady's the greatest. Well, Tom Brady isn't even remotely close to the most talented. I mean, not even remotely. Tom Brady isn't the most talented quarterback in his own division. Josh Allen's physical gifts and athletic ability blow Tom Brady's away. So a lot of it has to do, with the situation that you're in. I think, if Jameis was in Dak's situation, if he was drafted into a situation for Deshaun Watson, I'm high on Deshaun Watson. I think he's a fantastic young quarterback. But he was drafted to a team that made the playoffs both of the 2 years before he was drafted. And they did that with guys like Ryan Mallett, Brian Hoyer, Tom Savage as their quarterbacks. Watson missed the playoffs his rookie year, made it the next year. He might make it or may miss it this year. They were making the playoffs without him. Jameis Winston was drafted to the worst team in the NFL, a 2-14 team, a team that I think was 6-20 for him. There's a huge difference in how players are perceived, and people don't look at the situations they're in. If next year, Tua is drafted by the Dolphins, and a guy like Justin Herbert, say Drew Brees retires and the Saints trade up and they land Justin Herbert, and Herbert has a far better rookie year than Tua. Well, the media will fawn over Herbert and say he's this next great star, and they'll be down on Tua. Meanwhile, Tua could be far better as an individual player. He's just stuck in a far worse situation.
Mm-hmm. I think we agree on quarterback rankings at least because so often it comes down to people, look how many games he's won, look how many he's won. But when you take it, I mean, if you actually watch, just go back to watch last Sunday's game. Jameis Winston's career, his defense totally. I mean, to put up 34, Seattle was it? It was insane. So I think I respect looking at quarterbacks saying, oh well, he went 6-10, he's not good, because that's such a popular thing to say around the NFL. And it's like me, because I was like, Mitch Trubisky sucks. I saw him last, like he still sucks. I don't care. And then this year he's getting exposed for it. So I think to actually take a deeper is a very good thing for fans to do.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I point out in my book, I have a whole chapter about wins. And I think most fans are intelligent enough to realize that Super Bowl wins don't define a quarterback because guys like Trent Dilfer, Jeff Hostetler won Super Bowls, whereas Dan Marino didn't. Um, but a lot of fans will bring up things like playoff victories, playoff appearances, things of that nature. Um, Most people don't realize Joe Flacco has more career playoff wins than Dan Marino, Steve Young, Warren Moon, Joe Namath, etc. Joe Flacco is going to have to buy a ticket to get in Canton like you or I would. Danny White, Craig Morton, and Mark Brunell. I mean, there's a forgettable trinity if ever there was one. They all have more playoff victories than Warren Moon and Dan Fouts. So then people will say, okay, well, fine, you got us on playoff victories, but regular season, that's what really matters, the regular season win percentage. Andy Dalton has a higher regular season win percentage than Dan Fouts and Warren Moon. Steve Grogan has a higher regular season win percentage than Dan Fouts and Warren Moon. There are Hall of Fame quarterbacks that had very little team success. So I see the media, they kind of pick on Jameis for the win loss record, but it's all on the team. It's all on organizations. And I think fans, they're waking up to that fact, but it'll take a while because the media just continuously pushes that because it's a lazy narrative that they can get away with.
All right, so this is kind of a question we ask all of our guests for whoever we're interviewing or talking about. If you had to say someone's game is like Jameis Winston, or you want to be like this person, I know everyone wants to be their own person. Who do you think Jameis Winston like mirrors his own game off of?
Oh, that's interesting. Um, a lot of people will compare him with Big Ben. Even Arians, after the London game, after Jameis, had 6 turnovers, 5 picks, he sort of shrugged it off and said he reminded him of Big Ben. But Jameis is a lot more athletic than Ben. Um, some people will want to compare him with Favre, and I definitely do. Jameis is also a lot more athletic than Favre. So to me, there isn't really just one guy that stands out. I have heard some people say McNabb, but Jameis has a better arm than McNabb. He's more accurate. He has better touch on the ball. He's a better leader. So I think really you sort of have to look at sort of a mashup of players, and I think that Big Ben, Brett Favre, and maybe a guy like Steve McNair, the three of them sort of mashed together. They kind of make up Jameis, and Jameis doesn't have as big an arm as Favre did. I mean, almost nobody does, and he's not quite as athletic as McNair, but he's more athletic than Favre. He's more athletic than Big Ben, and he has a better arm than McNair. So I think the three of those guys that they sort of mash up together to make Jameis.
Do you think Bruce Arians is the right guy to turn the ship around in Tampa Bay and help Winston get into the playoffs and start winning?
Um, I love Bruce. Bruce is my guy. I've never said a negative word about him. Um, I don't think that his system is the best system for Jameis. But that's fine. I mean, Bruce has a system and he's had success with it. I do think that Bruce, as a person and as a coach, is the best coach for Jameis. I think Jameis loves him. I think that you know he's the right guy to guide Jameis's career. Um, even if he doesn't have the perfect system, similar to say McVay with Goff. McVay, I think, is the right coach for Goff, even though his system maybe isn't the best. Although I would say it is. I'm just saying that there's situations like that.
So for your book, really, what was the? Why did you write it? What made you wanting to write a book about Jameis Winston's whole career and life in general?
Well, it didn't. It really didn't start off as a book. I was just going to write an article, and it sort of just kept growing. And I was put in contact with a few people from his past and things of that nature, and it just sort of an 8-page article turned into a 12-page article, turned into a book. And I had fun writing it. I was already doing a lot of research on Super Bowl era Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and so sliding Jameis in there to compare him with them, really wasn't that difficult for me. And he's just, if it was just the on-field, thing. I may not have written the book, but he's such a fascinating character study off the field as well that just the more I looked into him, the more I looked into his past, both on and off the field, the book just sort of came together, and I had a blast writing it.
Yeah, you talk about off the field, and you're expert over us. So I was gonna ask you, going back to like I think it was right maybe the last year of college, the stealing crab legs incident. Was that overblown? Was that really that big of a deal? Can you break down what that really?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely overblown. And that isn't just because it was Jameis. It's more so that it was a Heisman winning quarterback. A quarterback
Yeah.
that was projected to be number one in the draft. So I think if Tua were to do the same thing, it would be just as big of a deal. But you know when you actually watch the security footage, you know an employee sets out a plate of seafood at the counter. Jameis walks up, takes the plate the employee set out for him, meanders through the store slowly, even backtracks and looks at something else on the shelf, and then slowly walks out the front door with this plate of seafood in wide open view of everyone. Now, I've never seen a criminal in my life act like that. If Jameis was actually stealing and I'm gonna steal this plate of food, I just don't think there's any way that he acts like that. So when he gave the interview to Jim Harbaugh before the draft, and he said, well, yeah, I took responsibility for it, but I mean, what am I going to do? Am I going to get my buddy fired? I had a hookup. The manager had me covered. So I think most people who have gone to college, have gone to high school. We've all been in a situation where we had a buddy that worked at a store or whatever that had us covered, that gave us a hookup. That's not stealing. Now, if the employee doesn't pay back like he's supposed to, then. But if you have a manager friend at a store that says, "Hey, man, you can come in and take $10 worth of crab legs. I'll cover it," then that isn't stealing. You're going in there on the manager taking some food. The manager's supposed to cover the bill. So yeah, I think the media blew it way out of proportion, and people still talk about it today. And I just say, have you watched the video? Yeah, not in his mind.
So just for Jameis Winston himself, sorry, allergies are pretty bad right now. What do you think he needs to do to improve on over these next few years?
I think a lot of it for him is mental. That there he doesn't have any physical limitations. He's not he's not somebody that needs to fix his mechanics. He isn't somebody that needs to build upper body strength, anything like that. He's got a cannon of an arm, and he has elite athleticism just for the quarterback position. Um, so with him, it's mental, and what I mean by mental is simply learning to live for another down, throwing the ball away when guys aren't open, on busted plays, just getting down, taking a sack or throwing it away, not trying to play a Superman, not trying to carry the team. And that's hard for him because his entire life he's been the I mean, this is a guy who got into Pop Warner football as a 4-year-old playing against 8-year-olds. I mean, that's not normal. That isn't a normal thing. This is a guy who I believe when he was 5 years old or something called his first audible. He's a phenom. He's been playing quarterback at a high level and been considered the man, since he was a little kid. And he went to a high school that was, had a terrible history with their football program, and he carried them. And then he won. Then that program fell apart after. And then he went to the NFL and gets drafted by the worst team in the NFL. And so his whole life, he's sort of been an offense carrying quarterback. He's never been a guy where the coach says, "Hey, man, you got a great defense, a great run game. We got you. Just go out there and throw out a play action." He's always been a guy where the coach has put a ball in his hands and said, "Sling us to victory, young man." And that's tough to sort of get out of that mindset. I think popping him into Dallas or a situation like that, it would be great for his stats. He'd all of a sudden become infinitely more efficient, and the media would praise him. But I don't know that will ever happen because he's a talent like Warren Moon, Dan Fouts, Dan Marino, these gunslinger guys. Where whatever team he's with, whether it's Tampa or somebody else in the future, probably his coach and his GM are always going to consider him an offense carrier. and demand that he carry the team. So I don't really think he's ever going to turn into a guy that is supremely efficient and has a really low interception percentage and stuff, because I think wherever he goes, his coaches are always going to require him to throw the ball further down the field than just about any other quarterback, and to be aggressive, and never to just be a game manager. So for Jameis, I think it's just a mental process of learning the game and learning when to give up on plays, and that's difficult. But yeah, I think he'll get it.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up with one last question. That mutually, they want to be together, split up. But if he were to go to another team, where do you think the best fit would be?
Well, again, I think every quarterback in the NFL is envious of Dak's situation in Dallas. I do expect Dak will get re-signed, but you never know. I mean, crazier things have happened. If Jerry Jones lets this go all the way to the offseason and says, Dak, we're going to give you, slightly more than Jared Goff, and Dak balks at that and demands $40 million a year, it's possible that Dallas says, okay, bye. And if that happens and Jameis also hits free agency, which I don't think will happen, I think Tampa for sure will lock him up. But I think that would be the best situation. But as far as realistic situations, if Jameis were to hit free agency, which again I don't think will happen, I think John Elway will move heaven and earth to get him. I think John Elway will fall in love with Jameis's game. He'll bring him in for an interview and just fall in love with him as a kid. Jameis is just an easy guy to root for, and the media has spun sort of a narrative about him, and people don't have an accurate picture of him. But I think if John Elway gets in a room with Jameis, he'll love Jameis. And I think Denver is a good situation. It's a good organization with a great history of winning. It's got rough weather, and it's down there where your boy Mahomes is, but it's a good team. It's a good organization. So I do look at that as a solid landing spot.
All right. Jameis 101, we appreciate the time. If you guys are listening, go follow him on Jameis 1 of 1. Always has some interesting takes on the Bucks and Winston. We do appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. We'll see you guys on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Central. Thanks, guys.